The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Joyful Pouring with April. I'm April, and I am a fluid artist located here in Easton, and I'm excited to show you what I do and get you excited about it as well. I live in Easton with my husband and my 3 almost grown-up kids and 2 dogs, and I started doing fluid art when a few years ago, I felt like I needed an outlet for just creativity. I grew up in an artist's home and have always loved color and just had never time to do it on my own. So I decided to pick it up. I went down the YouTube rabbit hole on how to do this specific form of art, and I'm excited to share it with you. When most people think of fluid art, they think of paint pouring, which is when you literally pour paint onto a canvas and see what it does. Fluid art is a little bit more detailed in that it has many different techniques and mixtures that you use to make different designs and different compositions. And the more that I went down that little rabbit hole, the more I fell in love with this specific art form. And today, I'm just going to show you 2 very basic, simple, and beginner fluid art techniques. But before I do that, I wanted to show you a few examples of what you can do with fluid art. I have a few paintings that I've done, and I just want to show them to you. We're not going to get into those techniques today, but hopefully down the road, if we continue to do this, we'll get into some more advanced techniques. So these are just a few techniques that I have learned to do over the last year or 2, and they are pretty exciting. This first one is called, actually I have it upside down, but this one is called a swipe technique, and you basically take the paints and swipe them over themselves, and they make all these tiny little cells. You have to use a special ingredient that you have to get from Australia. So this is a more advanced technique, and it is really, really fun to do. This one here is actually one we're going to do today. This is called a straight pour, and it uses layered paints that you pour on the canvas, and it creates these amazing lines in between the layers of paint. This one here is called, well, this started out as what's called a puddle pour, meaning just puddling paints onto the canvas, making a design in them, and then stretching it out. And these specific paints are white when you start painting with them, and then they change color as they dry, so you never really know what you're going to get. They're really fun to work with. And then this last one is my husband's favorite. This is called a landscape pour, and we're going to do a technique today that is the basis of this kind of painting, and it's called a flip cup, and that is a very basic fluid art technique, and that's what we're going to start with today. So there are 3 really important steps in fluid art before you start your painting. The first thing is you need to know what your color palette is going to be. And for everyone that's different. For me, I've learned that you can never go wrong with blues and purples. So that's what I have here. I have a bunch of blues and purples, and then you always want to add in a metallic. The metallics just add shine and dimension to your paintings. And I have a gold for my metallic. If you ever have trouble figuring out what colors to use in any form of painting, a great tool that I found is a color wheel, and it's so simple. You can pick them up at Michael's or any paint store, and basically a color wheel shows you the different kinds of like the hot, what am I trying to say? Warm colors and cold colors. You usually don't want to mix warm colors and cold colors, but this tells you colors that are ones that are next to each other tend to go well together. Ones that are across from each other complement each other. So if you're ever having trouble picking out colors for a painting, you can pick one of these up for a couple bucks at a paint store, and it can really just give you an idea of what paints will look nice together. The next thing that's really important in fluid art is how you mix your paints, because there are many different kinds of fluid paints out there. There are some that are pre-mixed. You can go to Michael's and see pre-mixed pouring paints. And those are great when you're first starting out because you don't have to worry about how to mix the paints. But once you've kind of gotten into it, you realize that mixing your own paints actually saves you money because the paints stretch further, and you can add ingredients that keep the paints from cracking as they dry. It allows them a little bit more flexibility to stretch. So my favorite thing to mix my paints with is called Floetrol, and this is the big bottle. I tend to put it in a smaller bottle to make it easier to work with. And you can find this at any hardware store or like Sherwin-Williams or any of those places because it's used by professional painters to help thin their paint to spread it further. But what it does is it adds an elasticity to the paint to allow it to stretch and not crack as it dries. You'll also see pouring mediums when you go to like Michael's. And you can mix those with your paints as well. And the paints that I usually use are tube paints. You could start off with craft paints in the little bottles. You could start off with like the lesser expensive version of tube paints, like the Artist Loft paints at Michael's. This is Liquitex, and these are my favorite paints to use. And these are just regular tube paints. If you were painting with a brush, you could just squirt them out and use them with a brush without mixing them with anything. They're great paints. But what I am going to do for you is just show you how to mix your paints for fluid art. I have already mixed a few, but I'm going to mix up 2 more colors. And generally, the colors are mixed in a 2-to-1 ratio. So I'm putting my apron on here so I don't get my shirt dirty. But the 2-to-1 ratio is 1 part paint and 2 parts of your medium, whatever that is. So whether it's Floetrol or a pouring medium that you buy at the store that's specifically for paint pouring, you're going to mix it with your paint in a 2-to-1. So I use a handy dandy little kitchen scale, and I do it in grams because that's the more accurate. Some people do it in mLs, but with paint is so thick that you really can't tell the mLs until it flattens out. So grams usually are the better way to go. So I'm going to mix up 2 colors for you and just show you how that's done really quickly, and then we'll get to the fun part. So I'm going to zero my scale here. I'm going to put on some gloves. I have to say I don't always wear gloves when I paint, and you can usually tell when I haven't because I go out places with paint on my hands. But I'm going to use gloves today because it's the right thing to do. And, you know, I don't want to make a mess everywhere. So first, I'm going to start with this bright aqua green. It's a Liquitex color. And we're just going to do a small amount because for these paintings, you really only need a small amount. There is a calculator online that tells you how much paint you need per square inch on your canvas if you're doing fluid art. I don't have that with me, but it's easy to Google a fluid art paint calculator, and it will tell you how much paint you need. For this size canvas, which is about a 10-inch round, you need about 6 ounces of paint. Total. So with all your colors, 6 ounces total. So I'm just going to squirt my paint in first, and I'm going to start with 20 grams of paint. There's my 20 grams. And then I'm going to zero out my scale again. And to do the 2 to 1, I'm going to do 40 of my Floetrol. Now, some people will tell you to do the Floetrol first. I just saw a big glob goober go in there, so I'll have to find that and pull it out in a second. One thing with Floetrol is it can get like little globs of stuff in it. So when I'm at home, I will put it through like a kitchen strainer when I pour it, so that those globs don't go into my paint. So now I have 40 of the Floetrol, and I'm going to mix it up. And the Floetrol is white, so you would think it would lighten your paint, but it doesn't. It dries clear. And you really want to remember to scrape the bottoms and the sides as you mix it up. Now, there is a specific consistency to the paint. That is the third most important thing with fluid art, is the consistency of your paints. All your paints that you're working with need to be the same consistency. There's different techniques that use very thin consistencies and other techniques that use very thick consistencies. Today, we're going to use kind of an in-between consistency for this painting. So you see I've mixed it, and you can still see that it's really thick, like it doesn't flow off of my stick very well. So you're not going to add more Floetrol to thin it. What you're going to do is add water. These are acrylic paints. They don't push away from the water like oils do. Acrylic paints are water-based, so you can add some water, and you want to do it very slowly because you don't want them to be too thin. So just a few drops. And then you're going to continue to mix until that's all incorporated into your paints. And this, honestly, is what takes the longest in fluid art, is mixing your paints. So most of the time, if I know I'm going to be painting on a specific day that's still really thick, see how thick that is? The consistency should be like warm honey. So if you've ever warmed up honey, and you see how it flows off, this is still very, very thick. I'm going to add a little more water, and you keep doing that until it's mixed to the consistency that you want. And then I'm going to show you a very handy-dandy tool that I have for checking your consistency of all of your paints to make sure they're the same. All right, so next step is checking your consistency. You want to make sure that your consistency is the same through all of your paints. Otherwise, paints that are heavier will sink into paints that are less heavy. And you want your paints to all be an equal star in your painting and not have any disappear because they're too heavy. So I have this consistency chart. And this consistency chart, basically, it's got these little circles. You're going to put your 1 drop of paint in each circle. Then you're going to tilt it up and make sure they all flow the same. And I'm going to show you how that works. So we're going to start with 1 drop of each on my chart here. And you want to make sure the drops are about the same size, because bigger drops will flow faster than smaller drops because there's more paint in them. I just love these colors. I tend to gravitate to the purples and blues. It's just what my eye likes. But anytime I've gone away from them to like oranges and reds, and I love those too. So it's a matter of experimenting and sometimes getting out of your comfort zone. These colors are my comfort zone, so I felt like it was a good way to start my first episode with you. All right, so now I've got all of my paints on my consistency chart, and I'm gonna tip it up and see how they flow. I'm gonna count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now you can see here that these colors moved faster than these colors. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit more water to these 4, and then we should be good. So that's the dark purple, the gold, the turquoise, and the light blue. Just a little, like a drop more water, because they were pretty much right on. Now, it's okay if the consistency is just a little bit different, but you don't want it like remarkably different. And for this particular technique that we're going to be doing, it is okay if they're a little bit different because it actually adds more kind of depth and dimension to the painting. Okay, now just a little bit to that light blue, and I think we'll be golden. Great. I'm just going to wipe this off before the paint dries so I can use it again. It's plastic. You can use it over and over and over again. All right. So the technique I'm going to be doing in this first painting is called a flip cup. And this one is really fun. It's very basic and a beginner technique. I'm going to use my little silicone cups here. And these are 5 ounces. So it may not be enough to cover the whole thing, but that's okay because I can show you what we do if it doesn't cover it all. And for this technique, basically, you're just going to pour your paints in one by one into the cup together. You're not going to mix it because you want each color to have, you know, a little bit of a star moment in your painting. The darker colors tend to take over. So and the first color that you put in your cup is the last color out usually. So I like to start with the lighter colors. They don't take over as much as the darker ones. So I'm going to start with this blue. And the higher you bring your cup, the more the colors mix together. And in this particular technique, we want them to be a little bit mixed, but not like super mixed. And you can see how pretty they're starting to look in the cup there. Gonna go in with our gold. Gold adds shine, it adds little details. You can use silver, you can use pewter, you can use any kind of metallic color. I'm actually going to leave the black out because I think it's going to make it look muddy. So we're just going to stick to these colors. And I'm going to keep filling this cup. You don't have to go in the same order every time for your colors. You can do different order with the second round. That's not a problem. I think we're going to go here. I think I saw a little goop go in there. That's okay. We'll fix that. Okay. I think this will be our last round. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I haven't done one of these flip cups in a while because I tend to gravitate towards the harder techniques now because I'm trying to learn how to do them. So this is going to be a surprise for both of us. And I love that. That's fantastic. All right, so we've got our cup. Our paints are sort of mixed in there, but not really. And then I'm going to take my canvas and I'm going to place it on top of my cup. And then we're going to flip them. Okay, we're going to flip them. And now we're going to leave it there for a minute. We're going to let the paints settle down onto the canvas and kind of let them mix a little bit and percolate, let some chemical reactions happen. And then we're going to pull it up and see what we've got. Going to give it another minute or two. Now there's a couple ways you can pull your cup up. You can just pull it straight up. If you pull it straight up, the paint tends to bloop right out. You can tip it and drag it. And then when you tip it and drag it, you kind of like make the paints kind of swirl in with each other. I guess there's two ways. Those are the two ways you can do it. Another way that some people like to do it, if you have a paper cup, which I don't have, you can actually stick a thumbtack into the paper cup and pull it out, and then it does something like a bomb. It explodes because the air goes into the cup and pushes the paint out. And that's really cool. Maybe someday I'll show that one. All right, I think our paint has probably settled enough. So I'm going to pull the cup and I'm going to tip this so that the paint starts to move a little bit, and we're going to swirl it around. And you can see all those gorgeous colors. I'm going to try to get the rest of my paint out here. All right, so right away, I'm going to look at this. You can see there's bubbles in the paint. If I had thought ahead, you can use a kitchen torch to just go over it and pop those bubbles. You don't want to burn your paint, so you just kind of go very quickly over it. I have some tweezers. I'm going to use those to just pop these bubbles. If you leave bubbles in your painting as it dries, they will pop and cause little like canyons in your painting. And you don't want that. Or maybe you do. You do you, right? All right, so we've got some very pretty little lines here. And you can see over here, it might be hard to see, but there's what we call cells. So there are these little bubbles that kind of pop up with color around them, and that is caused by the metallic paints, which is why I like to add them, because it adds a chemical reaction that is very, very cool. So I'm just going to let that sit a minute and react if it's going to react. You can see the gold starting to come up over here as well. And, you know, so already you can see that paint pouring isn't just pouring paint on canvas. There is technique to it. There is thought put into it, especially with which colors you use and how you lift that cup. There are some very pretty lines in here. I'm not super happy with the way these bubbles here are forming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a palette knife and I'm actually going to run it through these to break them up a little bit and make some more lines in my composition. See, those look like little hearts. Now, you want to fill this whole canvas, right? So I do feel like I don't have enough paint to fill the whole canvas. So how I can make that happen is by taking some of my leftover paints and putting them around the edge. And by doing that, it will allow the paint that's in the middle to stretch further. So I'm just going to put a layer of this purple paint around. I do feel like my paint might be a little bit too thick for this technique, but that's a lesson in consistency. So maybe for the next painting, we'll thin them out a little bit. We're going to go around again here. All right. And then I'm going to use just my finger. We're going to spread this out to the edge. So paint flows best when it has other paint to flow over. It does not flow well on a dry canvas. I know this looks kind of messy right now, but once we spread it out, you'll see how pretty it can be. The other thing that I didn't do that I want to point out is that sometimes, especially with larger canvases, they can sag in the middle. What you can do to prevent that sagging is spraying some water from a water bottle onto the back of the canvas, and then that causes the canvas to tighten. All right, so now comes the fun part. We're going to stretch this painting out and see what it does. Okay, so I'm going to lift it up and I'm going to start moving it. And I'm going to look at where the heaviest part of my paint is and where it's moving. Okay, so it looks like it's kind of heavy towards that way, so we're going to go that way first. And then since this is a round canvas, I'm actually going to stretch it in a round instead of like corner to corner if I was using a square canvas. And it is really important to do this very, very slowly because you don't want to lose any of the parts that you like. So as you're stretching, you want to look at what you like and what you don't like. And the parts you don't like, you can stretch off of your canvas. The parts you do like, you want to try to center in your canvas. So you can see that those cells or those round bubbles stretch and form a design of their own. And some people really like that. Some people really don't. It's all personal preference. But you can see how pretty this is coming out. I'm glad I added that gold because it definitely added some areas of interest. Okay, we're almost there. Okay, so now that it's stretched completely around the edges, I'm going to set it down and I'm just going to look at it. And I'm going to figure out what I like and what I don't like and how I can change it to make it better. First thing that I want to do is break up this big purple spot in the middle there, this negative space. So again, I'm going to take my palette knife and I'm just going to run it through the colors and make some little lines of interest. I'm going to start in the gold and kind of bring it into the rest here. And really just add some interesting lines. I want to bring a little bit of this down here. And this blob right here, I want to do something with. So we're going to actually go right through it, kind of bring it down this way. Beautiful. Bring this up this way. don't be afraid to play around with your painting. Just because that's how it came out of the cup doesn't mean that's how it has to stay. This is very interesting over here. Okay, so I really like the lines here. Not a huge fan of this part. So I'm going to try to tip a little bit of that gold off. I'd like to bring these lines a little bit more towards the center. And you can see how my paint is still moving very well, which means I have a lot of paint on the canvas. It will stop moving so well once enough paint has been moved off of the canvas. All right, I'm going to go this way a little bit. I want it to feel like it flows in a way that makes sense. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Now, I'm going to stop here, and I'm actually going to get down at eye level and look at the canvas. And the reason I'm doing that is to look for any thing that's in the paint, any like little blobs that came out of the paint, because Floetrol is a paint leveler, so it will dry level. But if there's any little blobs in there, when it dries, those are going to be bumps in your painting. And you can usually see them when you look from the side, because the paint moves around them and they stay in one spot. I think we're pretty good here. The other thing you want to make sure you do is cover the sides of your canvas. So there's no blank spots. All right, and there we have it. So you can use any color combination you like. You can flip your cup any way you want. You don't have to do it the way I did, where you flip the canvas. You can just take the cup and flip it down. That takes practice. Sometimes the paint goes everywhere. But, you know, that's the fun of this, is that it's about experimenting and learning what you want to do. I wanted to do one more painting with you, and I think we'll try to squeeze it in. It is pretty much the same technique, only we're going to layer the paints instead of pouring them all in together. And this is another beginner technique. All right, so we already have our paints mixed up. I felt like they were a little bit too thick, so I am just going to add a little touch of water to each one of these paints. And then we're going to get to it, and this is actually one of my favorite beginner paint pouring techniques. It's called a straight pour, and really you just layer your paints in a cup and pour them on. There's no like manipulating of the canvas or anything like that. I just wanted to make these a tiny bit thinner. If you tune in next time to episode 2, I'm going to talk more about paint consistency. And what we'll do is do an experiment with some really, really thin paints, and then an experiment with some really thick paints, and maybe one in between. And then, there's no wrong consistency. It's dependent on what technique you're using and what you like your painting to look like at the end. If you like your colors to be a little bit more blended, then you want to use a thinner consistency. If you like your colors to be a little bit more defined, then you want to use a thicker consistency. All right, so this is another example of first color in, last color out. I want my last color to be gold for this one. So I'm going to put that in first. Now, this technique requires you to layer your paints. So we're going to start by pouring them along the edge of the cup. And if all of your paints are the same consistency, then they will layer perfectly. You will see when I'm done here. And I am going to add a little black this time, just for something different. And I'm just going to run it along the edge of the cup here. We're going to do our dark purple and our light purple. Our light blue. Our dark blue. And our aqua. And then I'm going to continue layering till I fill this cup up. Now, depending on how thick and thin your layers are, you'll see how they look on the canvas. I'm just looking to see what I did next. Okay, the dark. Okay. Almost done. Usually 2 or 3 layers. Is enough. All right. You can see, hopefully, how my colors are layered in there and how they're maintaining the layers. They're not mixing together. And a straight pour is literally what it sounds like. I'm just going to pour it straight on the canvas and see what the colors do. And you want to go down or up depending on, what you want it to look like. The closer you hold it to the canvas, the thicker your lines and negative space are going to be. The further you take it, the thinner your lines are going to be. And I'm going to rotate my hand a little bit here to add a little bit of dimension. Oh my goodness, and you can see as this is coming out, that gold added some of those cells that I talked about earlier. Now, you can twist your hand like I'm doing, or you can use a spinner, a cake spinner, and put your canvas on the cake spinner to help you spin it. At the end, I'm just going to do a little circle with the paint here to give it a little bit of a design. Okay. Now you can see how pretty that looks already. Now it's coming this way because my table's not level or my canvas is not level. That's okay, we'll figure that out. Okay. And now to add a little bit more fun to it, I'm going to take my little palette knife and I'm just going to add some lines in here to make it pretty as I stretch it. Okay. Again, I feel like I don't have enough paint on this canvas, so I'm going to take what I have left over, put it around the edges to help stretch it. I love this technique. It's really fun to try different colors, to try to pour it in different ways, to manipulate the paint by moving your hand around. If the paint's not all the same consistency, you will know because it will begin to blur and look a little bit muddy. Okay, so I'm going to start off by heading this way because it looks like that's the way the paint wants to go anyway. And again, since it's a round canvas, we're going to do it in a circle. Okay. I don't want to lose too much of that design, so I'm really just trying to lose the flow color, the color that I put around the edges to make it flow. Again, you want to do this very, very slowly so you can see how it looks as you go. Okay. This is very interesting. Oh my goodness, this is so cool. Okay. Happy I made that little line in the middle there. See how the gold has kind of taken over? All right, and we are almost done. I just want to get this little bit of aqua green here off. I want to keep that design that kind of looks like a feather or a palm branch in the middle there. And then I'm going to go this way, try to get this little blob of purple off. But if it looks like it's ruining my design, I'm just going to leave it. You don't want to tilt too much because then all your colors will blend together and look muddy. All right, I think I'm actually going to leave it the way it is because I don't want to lose that design in the middle. Maybe not. We're going to go this way a little bit more. There's still a lot of paint there in the middle. Okay. All right. There we go. And that, my friends, is 2 very basic paint pouring methods. And like I said before, paint pouring is a beginner technique in the wider world of fluid art. Thank you for joining me today. I can't wait to teach you something next time. And if you want to see more of my artwork, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Joyful Pouring by April. Thank you. Have a great day.